Good morning. Welcome to the final DCSR ZOOMIE for the year 2023. Before we get started, I am Michelle Geiger-Bronski, for those of you who have not been on a ZOOMIE when I've been moderating. Our speaker today is Kathleen Folz, and she is going to address a topic that is perplexing to probably many of us. I know I have personally had Scotties in my life for about 30 some years. And when I go to this food store and look at all those bags or look at all those different kinds of foods, it's very perplexing sometimes. And how do you make that choice? So Kathleen is going to share with us some tips that she's developed over many years of working in the retail industry. And before I turn things over to Kathleen for her to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about herself, I want to remind you that this session is being recorded and it will be posted on our website at www.darkcountyscottyrally.org. And it'll be up there probably towards the end of the day for sure. And I'll also make an announcement on Facebook when that is. The second thing I want to let you know is that although it is not mandatory for you to make a donation, donations are always welcome to help us cover our administrative costs of holding the ZOOMIEs. And those donations can be made via PayPal. Again, the link for that is on our website, or you can always send us a check or a donation in any kind that you want. So if you want more information about that, please just private message me. So at the end of the session, we'll turn things open to questions and answers. And until then, if you come up with a question, please go ahead and place it in the chat little icon at the top or bottom of your Zoom toolbar, and then we'll address that towards the end. So Kathleen, it's all yours.
Thanks, Michelle. I appreciate the opportunity. And it's good to connect with Scotty people again, because as some people may know, I've never actually had a Scotty, but I have a lot of Scotty friends from being doing the canine massage at the Scotty Rally. So it's good to connect. So to begin with, I have had dogs, mostly greyhounds, my adult life. I always say I was the second child. My big sister was a dachshund. And along the way we had, I chose a collie when I was little. It was my first dog, Airedales and bloodhounds. And then when I got to be an adult, it was a greyhound, and then 5 greyhounds and a greyhound mix. And now I'm back to 2 collies and a couple bloodhounds thrown in there too. So that, and a lot of experience since the, late 90s in dogs as an adult, because when I was a kid, we went to the feed mill. We got the Purina horse chow, the Purina dog chow, and we got the Purina cat chow if we had any barn cats. So that was my background growing up. And Mom would bake chicken necks and backs, which we know is not a good idea now because of cooked bones, but she would throw those out along with getting stale bread from a bakery and sopping up all the juice from that. And that was the scraps that the barn cats got fed. So that was my upbringing. And I'd like to think that I've learned a lot. So if you'll give that as part of my history, I've come a long way. So I've been in retail for, since, what has it been, about 2000, 2001, something like that. Anyway, quite a few years. And I've started learning from the beginning, just amazing things, because I was fortunate enough in the retail experience with dogs to start out at a very holistic store, Bark and Scratch Outpost, in the Milwaukee area. And that was the beginning of my holistic and nutritional education. It came from, I've got no special degree in it. My degree is in education. My education, learning about all of this, came from many holistic veterinarians along the way. And of course, from companies, because they all want you to know the best qualities of their food, and from other areas, people of different expertise along the way via seminars and that sort of thing. So I am not a vet. I am not a vet tech, and I have no special degree in it, but it's just my experience over the years. And with my own dogs, And then also the feedback that I get when somebody walks in the door and says, I need a dog food. Here are the circumstances. And then they come back. I ask them, please give me feedback. So the feedback is, hey, that worked. Or, whoa, can we go back to the drawing board? So, and a lot of it is trial and error, as you may know, going through the years with your dog or dogs, and then each one of them is different. So where you develop your own individual experience with one dog, that's not going to work for your next Scotty or your Westie or something, or whatever you have. So that's kind of my background. Currently, I live with 2 collies and 3 cats. And so I've kind of come full circle. The first dog I got to choose was a collie, and now I have 2. And they're wonderful. One is an old-time Scotch collie, so I'm getting closer to a Scottish Terrier, but we got the same background. Okay, so to begin with, Michelle had kind of given me some ideas of what you would like to hear, what she would like me to cover. And so I'll kind of start and just give you a brief outline of the canine digestive system, which you may already know a lot about, but just kind of as a review or a reminder. It's obviously different from a human's digestive system, a little bit different than a cat's digestive system, much different than a goat or a cow. So what we're looking at is a digestive tract, which is very short in comparison to the animal's body size. I had one Great Dane owner say, well, you have no idea. I was in a necropsy with a Great Dane and the intestines were really long. Yes, when you unfold them, they are, but relative to body size is the key. So food goes through a canine digestive tract in about, what do they say, 8 to 10 hours? Yeah, 8 to 9 hours, something like that. Whereas our human digestive system can take 24 hours to get that meal through to 36 hours. So we have more time in the stomach to do a lot of processes. And the canine digestive system says, wow, I really need this food to be very nutritious and very absorbable in a shorter amount of time. So with that in mind, then we kind of go to the parts of the digestive system in the canine. You're going to start with the mouth. It's more acidic than ours. That's where the digestion starts. And we know in our mouth, our enzymes start, and our maceration, our chewing of the food starts that digestive process. Dogs were meant to break, tear, and kind of chew a little bit, but mostly swallow chunks of meat and organ and bone, whatever they hunted. And then it goes down the esophagus into the stomach. Their stomach is highly acidic. Again, like their mouth being more acidic, it's killing off bacteria, which is why dogs can eat raw food and we need to cook our meat. And it's why dogs can lick their butts, and we probably shouldn't do that. So they have a way of handling that good bacteria. And then it goes on into the small intestines, where a lot of that nutrition absorption occurs. And then what's left, what is not absorbed, into that solid matter, into the large intestines, and then out. And each way taking a little more goodness out of what's there before it comes out in their feces. So that in mind, it's pretty much basic digestion like we all do. And so let's think about what we're putting into our dogs. And if we think about it, dogs have been, archaeological evidence shows about 30,000 years, dogs have been around, sort of in that connection with humans, etc. And it's amazing. And most of that time, I will tell you that people didn't go to a store and buy dog food. The dogs hunted and they scavenged, and then, hey, humans started sharing. And so they would throw things their way, and dogs ate a lot. Their variety was incredible. And nobody said, oh my gosh, we've got to balance this. Dogs just ate such a variety that they got balance over time. And then we come to an electrician in about 1860, an electrician named James Spratt. And he was in London. He was an opportunist, and he kind of looked for business opportunities, and he saw some sailors throwing their ration biscuits off the ship onto the dock, and these dogs going crazy over them. And he thought, I bet I could do something and market it. And so he took that basic idea of that basic ration biscuit added some vegetables, some beetroot and some meat, and he made the first fibrine biscuit. And then he marketed, and he marketed to people who would want to actually pay money to give something to their dog. And then eventually someone else said, well, hey, you know, I can do that too. And thus, some years later, Milk-Bone decided to compete with him. And from there on, it kind of spiraled until Purina came in and said, hey, here's an extrusion process. We're going to make a food, not just these biscuits, but we're going to make a food. And they had the extrusion process down. So now we're going to take all these ingredients, the wet and the dry, mix them together, and we're going to use pressure and high heat, and we're going to extrude them through a die and cut them up into little bitty kibbles. And so now we've taken this fresher food that we used to feed, and we've put it into this little dry thing and exposed it to high heat and pressure. And now we have a bag of shelf-stable kibble. There's some other things along the way too that played a role in what we feed our dogs. At the end of World War I, we had, unfortunately, a surplus of horses. We had tractors, we had cars coming into play. And so what to do with the surplus of horses? And a company formed the first canned dog food called Kennelation. And apologies to anybody who chooses a vegetarian diet. Some of this is kind of tough to consider, but it's part of the history of dog food, and it's good to know where we came from. But I am mindful that some of us choose to eat in a vegetarian way, and we have our sensibilities, and I appreciate that. So then World War II came, and in World War II, all of a sudden there was scarcity of metal. So we can't take all this metal and make these cans of dog food. And that's really when the idea of making that shelf-stable biscuit and then the shelf-stable kibble kind of came after all of that. And then we marketed to the 1950s crowd and said, hey, you got to feed this wonderful food in the bag. And 1950s were all about, hey, I can do this. Hey, I'm getting up in the world. I've got my perfect house and my perfect kids and my perfect dog. And oh, we're going to feed them this good food. And it's convenient, because it was all about convenience in the 50s and making our lives easier and quicker. So we had more time for all of this leisure activity. And then there was a real boom with companies coming out with different dog foods, mostly the dry and the canned. And then towards the 90s, and there have been a few people along the way otherwise, but then we started saying, you know, we're seeing some different health issues. And some people decided to take a look at this. Steve Brown was one of them. And he came up with the first, to my knowledge, the first commercial frozen raw food that you could buy. He said, wait a minute, let's go back and look at all of these health issues, and let's go back to what was happening. And let's look at dog nutrition. He definitely has studied nutrition quite a bit. And now he's a formulator and is hired by many companies to help them formulate their, especially raw foods, but he's done some others as well. And so then there was a definite backlash, but still the companies started springing up saying, I want what's better for my dog. And so I'm going to form this company and make this wonderful food, or more like, I'm making this wonderful food. Gosh, maybe I could sell it to other people who want a better idea for their dog. So something that's fresh. And there have been some jostling back and forth. There's been a big controversy about grain-free versus grain-inclusive. And there's never a dull moment in the pet food industry in the end. But really, let's look at what we want to put in our bowl for our dog. So the kinds of food that are out there and available now are the dry food that we all know in that bag, which is shelf stable. There's canned food, which is still a little bit more processed, can or may not have a lot of fillers or carbohydrates in them. And then we have on the other end of the spectrum, we have the raw food, or we have things that you can make at home. We have gently cooked, we have air dried. So let's try and make some sense out of all of that. First of all, let me just get to my pages. Okay, if we kind of look at all those foods that are available, and think of the dog's digestive system. That hydrochloric acid in the stomach is meant to break down those bones and that meat. And they really do not, and let me repeat, not have a need for all the carbohydrates that are in most foods or many foods out there. They are wonderfully built to process and get their energy from the protein, from the fat of the actual meat products. So with that in mind, if you think of yourself going to the farmer's market and you buy the fresh produce and you take it home and you wash it and peel it maybe and eat it, you're getting the best nutrition out of that food. And if you take those wonderful produce things that you bought and you cook them into a casserole, you've processed that a lot, but it's still pretty good. And that's kind of like the canned food. And then you take that casserole that you made, and let's say you mix some more carbohydrates. You mix flour in with it and you mush it all around and you roll it out and you bake it into something that can be broken up into hard little pieces. That's kind of like the kibble. Granted, the manufacturers will have put vitamins back in. They've put extra minerals, but then it's still subjected to the high heat and extrusion process. There's a few companies out there that bake it, so that'll be a little bit lower. Nonetheless, it's baking it. And then you put it in the bag, and that's kind of like the least processed. So if we ate that crackery thing that we've now just made, that's not going to have as much nutrition as those fresh vegetables that we brought at the produce stand. That won't have as much nutrition left as the casserole that we bake, but it's still got some goodness in it, and we eat that. Should we eat just that? No, we'll survive, but will we thrive? So keep that in mind for a moment too. So we'll start with the raw, and we'll work towards the kibble as far as what the choices are out there. When we talk about raw, you're going to go to the freezer section, which is now much more common in a lot of pet stores. And you're going to see either frozen raw, or you're going to see something that's processed, but in the freezer, because it wouldn't have a shelf life outside of the freezer. The frozen raw, usually for most commercially prepared diets, is going to be a complete and balanced diet. If your dog has some sensitivities, there are some companies that will make and package and sell something that is just rabbit. There's nothing else in that package. There's no added vitamins and minerals, because some dogs are very sensitive to some things that are found in most foods. And that's a way for you to, with your vet's help or a nutritionist's help, to balance that food yourself for your dog for the best health outcome for your dog with those sensitivities. And then most of them will contain bone for the calcium. They'll contain organ meat, and they'll contain muscle meat. And then every company is different as far as this one will put some vegetables in it, usually very, very little. This one will put some fruit and vegetables in it, very, very little. And so that is probably the short of making your own homemade raw diet, which a lot of people do. That's probably the best way to get a balanced diet in and the freshest possible ingredients. Then there's the lightly cooked category. Some people will buy, there's a lot of brands out there. I could start naming them, and you might have heard of some of them, but Stella and Chewy's is one. It's a Wisconsin company that has come out with a lightly cooked food that you can find in the freezer section. A Pup Above is one. Just Right has another. A lot of people are familiar with Fresh Pet. Fresh Pet is, if you open a package of something like a Pup Above and a package of Fresh Pet looks a little bit more like something you would slice in the deli, like bologna or something like that. That's more of the texture. It's definitely more highly processed than something like Stella and Chewy's or a Pup Above, where you open it up and you thaw it and you kind of stir it around, and it actually looks like something you just might have before cooking in your kitchen, the ground meat, and you're putting some vegetables in it. So we've got that Fresh Pet sort of category, a little more highly processed, but we've got the things like Stella and Chewy's and a Pup Above gently cooked, which is going to be a little more processed, of course, than the raw, but again, it's much fresher than things that are in the can or in the bag. And then we go to the canned food. And the canned food is going to definitely be, as in any canning process, it has heat, and the cans are all kind of a little bit different in what they have in them. You'll say, oh, canned food. Well, I've learned that's more fresh than this bag of kibble, so maybe I'll feed that. Still turn around the label, and we'll talk about labels in a minute. And then you go to the kibble, and as I had mentioned, that's gone through the extrusion process. Things have been added in, and shelf stable, yes, but every time I open up a bag, I give it the sniff test. I'm going to sniff for rancid fat, and which can happen. There could be a pinhole in that bag that nobody's noticed, and the fat could go rancid. So there are more problems with kibble oftentimes than there are with the fresher foods. So we just need to be mindful of those sorts of things. There's a couple of other categories. There's air dried. And so I don't know if you've heard of ZOOMIE. There's actually also Earth Animal. These also require you to kind of read the labels to see what you're getting. You're going to see $34.99 for this, and you're going to see $54.99 for this. Well, what's the difference? This is essentially a bag of meat. And if you think of all the meat it took to air dry to get down to this little bag, that's what you're paying for. You're paying for meat. And we know when we go to the grocery store that the meat counter is the more expensive between the meat and the produce department. So also a very good option, air dried as opposed to that heat process. And so this is also a very good option with food. It's just sort of in the middle there, kind of nice. So with that kind of in mind, let's talk about looking at labels. Obviously, the first thing that you want is you want meat in your dog food. You want a good protein source, and you want enough of that meat to make up most of that protein percentage that you see in the food. And labels are tough to look at because there isn't always, it's not always easy to interpret that information on the back of a dog food label. There is Dog Food Reviews, Dog Food Advisor, and a few other good websites out there that are going to help you in that label reading. So let's talk quickly about packaging. And I don't know if anybody recognizes this. This is not dog food, but it's chicken in a biscuit. And so we've got a lot of beautiful dog food packages out there, but I wanted to show you chicken in a biscuit. This is a cracker product for people from Nabisco. But looking at this, you would say, oh, look, I'm going to have some chicken for supper. Maybe not. But just sort of as a comical relief, this, if you look at this, it's got flour, it's got canola oil, sugar, salt, dextrose, monosodium glutamate, soy lecithin, baking soda, onion powder. Keep in mind, all of those ingredients have to be listed by weight. It's got more in weight in onion powder than the next ingredient, dehydrated cooked chicken. So it's got a pretty package. It's got chicken in a biscuit, so you think you're getting something with chicken in it, but there's really very little. And so when you start looking at labels and packaging, you have to get beyond the pretty picture of the steak, the pretty picture of the chicken, the fresh vegetables, the ears of the corn on the cob, that sort of thing. Get beyond that, and let's turn around the label a little bit and look. So I've got my, we'll pick this one because it's plaid, right? Highlander beef. People might recognize this brand. It's a Wisconsin brand. It's Fromm's. It's been around since 1928. I'm not promoting it. I'm just saying it's one of the choices. I have fed it. And actually this particular variety of Fromm's did well for one of my dogs. So it was fine. So if you're looking at the crude protein, we've got 27%. So in the ingredients, it starts out with beef, beef broth, lamb meal, haddock, then it gets to whole oats, dried egg product, whole barley, oatmeal, and potatoes, and pearl barley. So it does have a bunch of the grains in it, but it also has a lot of meat products as those first ingredients, which is what you want to see. You don't really want to see beef then go to all of the carbohydrates. So you want to see a lot of beef. That tells me that most of that protein level is going to come from all of that meat. Then actually, Farmina NND. This packaging actually will give you a little bit more information. And if you're frustrated or there's not a lot of information on a package, go to the website. Sometimes Fromm's, for instance, has a spot on their website where they will have extended information more than they put on the package. NND, for example, tells you lamb, dehydrated lamb, then pea starch. So I'm going, what's that about? Chicken fat, dried pumpkin, dried whole eggs, herring, dehydrated herring, herring oil, pea fiber. So we've got some pea starch and some pea fiber, but they did tell me a little bit extra. They told me that 96% of the protein content in this food is from the animal sources. So my confidence in that there's a lot of meat in this package is going to be higher because they've told me exactly what percent of their, let's see here, 28% protein is actually from a meat source. So that's another way to tell that you're getting a lot of meat in that bag. Again, they have pretty food on there too, but they have a ton of information. I want to show you this. These are all the countries this food goes to. It's really rather amazing. It goes all around the world. All of these are different languages. It's quite incredible. So to kind of compare that to what we see on a label in canned foods, and I will take Fromm again because they're a nice local Wisconsin company. And we have 3 different things from Fromm's. We have Frombalaya chicken, vegetable, and rice stew. So to those of us who think a nice warm bowl of stew sounds good this time of year, that's appealing. We have shredded chicken in gravy entree, and that sounds appealing. And then for some of us who like a plain old pate, we've got this chicken and duck pate, and it's in a nice fancy can, and that sounds good. But I do want to tell you that this is where that reading labels comes in. So we have chicken, chicken broth, duck, chicken liver, potatoes, carrots, flaxseed, peas, etc. And in here we have chicken broth, chicken, potatoes, carrots, green beans, peas, pinto beans, kidney beans, white beans. Whoops, we just kind of lowered the idea of how much of this can might be the actual shredded chicken. And then we have chicken, chicken broth, turkey broth, potatoes, carrots, white rice, peas. So again, it's nice and it's a stew, but how much meat is in the can? So sometimes, even though we like Fromm's has been around a long time, good quality. If we go to this, which looks like, I don't know, a little more plain can, I don't know, but we've got 95% premium chicken and chicken liver exclusive of water, single source protein. So this would be another one. Now we've got chicken, water sufficient for processing, chicken liver, and then it goes on into some of the gums to keep it together, but then right into the vitamins and minerals. So this can actually has more meat in it than these fancy cans too. So it's kind of a lesson in look at the back and see what you're looking for. Because if you're feeding a lot of people like to mix combined foods. So if you're feeding a dry food and you say, oh, I'm going to boost it up with a little bit of something fresher, and you choose a can, with some of these, you're adding a few more carbohydrates still, but with this one, you're adding more meat. And you'll find that even the price comparison is pretty good. And then I'm going to show you NND again because Farmina NND is really so much more meat. So lamb, herring, it does have some sweet potatoes and eggs, but this has also been one that's been nice and high in that meat protein, a little bit lower in those carbohydrates. And it's not a pate. You can actually see how much of it is the meat versus the sweet potatoes, for example, in this one. So just a little thought to turn that pretty can around and see what's actually in it. There's also the category of I would like to buy my own meat. I've got a good butcher, or I trust my local grocer in the meat department, and I want to do it myself. And so there are those products which help you do it yourself. There are things, if you want to do it raw, that you can use to balance out food. And each company will have their own method. Refer to them to help you balance. Some of them will tell you how to use different amounts depending on the fat content of your meat. So if you're using very lean beef or beef with a little bit more fat for whatever reason, really look at the company, ask the company questions, because if a company says, no matter what meat you're putting in the bowl, just put in a scoop of this and you'll be fine. I'm a little worried about that being more balanced, but there are people who like to do their own and they like to do a balancer. Definitely look and study the balancers that are out there and see which one is right for the type of meat that you're using and what your dog needs. So that's one thing. And then we've got companies. Dr. Harvey's is one, and he's got 3 different varieties of mixers. So this has everything that you need in it. And then he will tell you, again, this company breaks it down into what you're using and tells you how much moisture to add, tells you how to add an extra oil, and how to soak whatever's in this bag. They've got 3 in this line. They have 3 different ones. They have one that has some grain. They have one that has more of a green vegetable base. And then we have Paradigm. And this one is green superfood base. So this one has green beans, broccoli, bone broth, red and green bell pepper, cabbage, pumpkin, celery, kelp, alfalfa, turmeric, on and on and on. And so it's a good one if you want to add your own meat and rehydrate this. And you also have the option. You can do it raw or you can do it lightly cooked. So if your comfort level or health reasons indicate that you need to cook for your dog or cook because of health issues in the house, that's fine. It'll give you both of those options too. So there are definitely some good options no matter what you want to do out there. Okay. How are we doing for time? And I don't want to totally overdo it, but I also want to talk about some supplement ideas too.
It's 10:15, so you've got some time yet.
Sure. Okay. Let's talk about transition a little bit, because I think, Michelle, you had talked about transition. So let's say you've gotten some ideas and you wanted to experiment with some of the foods out there, to start by doing a topper, or you can start at the topper and do a lot. You're going to find a lot of products coming out there right now that are toppers. So again, Wisconsin company, Stella and Chewy's. A lot of people have seen this red bag. A lot of they're going out into some big box stores too. So it's maybe a little easier for people that don't live closer to a small type of store to get. And so Stella and Chewy's, the meal mixers are complete and balanced, but they call them meal mixers because people who want to feed some kibble and some raw and have something that's shelf stable can get the freeze-dried version. If you look at what's in the freezer and if you look at what's on the freeze-dried shelf, freeze drying is the next step. It's going to be the same formula for all the companies, but their next step, freeze drying, is a little bit more expensive, more equipment. And so you're going to pay a little bit more for the freeze dried. Nonetheless, you've got the convenience of it being shelf stable. So you could add this, keeping in mind to lower the amount of kibble that you're feeding if you want to do that, and add some of this. If you want to start using this as a treat, replace your biscuit cookie type treat with something like this meal mixer or the freeze-dried raw meat treats that are so prevalent out there. They've gone beyond the traditional beef liver that your vet always hands your dog for being a good dog. And there's chicken and there's fish, there's green lip mussels, everything is freeze-dried out there now. So try starting with those treats. That introduces your dog a little bit to something different in the tummy than they're used to, because their gut biome has to sort of switch and say, oh, I've got something new to work on, or something of the food nature. And then the other option is things that are called toppers. Every company has toppers these days. So this Momentum is actually another Wisconsin company. And they have, like, this one is just ground turkey gizzard, freeze-dried ground turkey gizzard. And this one is a topper with an antioxidant boost. So this one is beef liver with blueberries, carrots, and spirulina. So that can be given as a treat or as a meal topper. Again, keep in mind for the weight of our Scotties and other dogs that you want to decrease the amount of kibble that you're feeding when you're putting on a topper, because it's just like us. If we put gravy over that huge meal that we have at Thanksgiving time, maybe we shouldn't have taken such a high pile of mashed potatoes or something. It's all about how much you go in and how much goes out, and you're adding something that's a little bit more condensed in nutrition. So these are really good options too. I like to also think of treating with a purpose. So this one says antioxidant boost. This one says anti-inflammatory. This one says hip and joint. So these can be used as treats or toppers. Plus, let's say you have a dog who's got some health issue that would benefit from more anti-inflammatory food or properties of their food. Duck neck, kale, turmeric, root powder, and yucca powder. And so there's treating or topping with a purpose. So you can get some of these that are got that extra nutritional boost in them. Hip and joint has some extra glucosamine in it. So even though you might be giving a glucosamine MSM chondroitin supplement, here I can also make sure that I'm not giving something like a general cookie, which might have pro-inflammatory qualities about it, and give something that's a little more healthy and actually help with joint issues or inflammation, that sort of thing. A lot of options out there. A lot of people come in and their dog has dry, itchy skin or some issue where they think an oil supplement might be helpful. So I'm just going to talk to you just a little bit about the oils to use. And there's a lot of articles out there about which oil is good, which oil is bad. In the end, I think, pardon my little thing, rotating is going to be the best. So let's say you give salmon, rotate to something that has some flax oil or some sardine oil or some pollock oil or even some hemp seed oil. Rotate your oils and rotate your foods. And so here's some examples. This one is a farmed salmon from a company that has a good, clean farming record, because that's important too. We did a little research before we brought in the Brilliant Salmon Oil, for example, and we do like that company. Some people will say, oh no, I only get wild caught, and that's fine too. But again, you have some choices, and rotating is a good idea. And this one has small fish in it. So this is sardine, anchovy, and hemp oil. So again, for those who are concerned that this is a longer lived, larger fish that may have more contaminants just naturally taken in over time, if you have the shorter lived, smaller fish, they're lower on the food chain. And so you're giving something that is less likely to have those contaminants in that we want to avoid. So when you're looking at those oils to put in, even coconut oil, look for things that are either a variety where you go from big fish to small fish, where you go from a little plant-based in there, just to kind of rotate. So that way you're not getting you're not getting too much of a bad thing, and you're getting enough of a good thing to kind of go around. I'm going to back up a little bit and also tell you that when you're choosing your new foods, some people will get one food and they'll feed it for life because it worked. I'm going to actually encourage you to rotate foods. So you can rotate flavors within a brand. You can rotate brands of food. And then we'll get into that a little bit in transition too. Steve, I think you said something about adding pumpkin. And so there are ways to add a little bit of fiber like that canned pumpkin. Or recently my girl decided to eat a pumpkin that I had as a decoration outside. And that was interesting. It went through her well. But the canned pumpkin is one way to get that fiber in. And then coconut is another way. This is a dog-friendly company, organic coconut chips. And my cats love them as treats. My dogs love them as treats, or I'll use it a little bit of a sprinkle as a topper. Another good way to get some healthy oil and fiber in with the coconut oil, and not an overabundance of it. So that's good. Another thing to add to your food, whether it's feeding raw or whether it's feeding kibble, I do a combination of both. So when I filled out the survey, I put a combination of both. So my girls will get half kibble and half raw, and they always every day get some bone broth of some sort. So bone broth is really good. If you're not familiar with bone broth, it's taking the bones. You can take your chicken carcass, you can take your big beef bones, you can do it on the stove, you can do it in your crock pot. And the key ingredient is going to be some nice apple cider vinegar to leach some of those minerals out into the broth, depending on the bones that you use. Or if you buy chicken feet, that's a wonderful way to get more collagen in that bone broth. And then you're cooking it slowly for a long time, and you're getting all that goodness out. And then you're putting it on your dog's food. People will say, oh, I'll stop at the grocery store and buy bone broth. A note about that is turn that package over again, make sure there's no salt added, there's no vegetables that might include onions in it. No problem if you make your own and you know the vegetables that you're putting in and are safe. But just a note that either purchase, if you're going to, something that's dog safe, or read that label at the grocery store. One of those nice convenient things, because I don't have to worry about spilling this, is powdered bone broth. So some companies will have powdered. I just put a scoop of this in, and I've got my water kettle going, and I put warm water over the kibble and the bone broth and just mix. So that makes life really easy for me because I like convenience. Some people will say, hey, what about probiotics? And some of these bags of food will have that they have probiotics in them. When they're sitting on the shelf, maybe they're encapsulated probiotics. I don't know, but a lot of people like to add their own probiotics, and you can do that to the food too. There's a few nice ways to do it. There are a lot of chews out there. I don't always trust that those chews are going to be the most fresh, the most efficient way of getting those probiotics. So I like to use kefir, but if I need to put something else on the food, excuse me. Thank you. If I want to put something extra in, let's say I've got a bit of loose stool going through the house or something like that. Or if I have a specific issue with the dog, there are some really good and healthy ways to put probiotics in. Some of them are in powders. This company, it's just open powder. So you put the recommended dose in the food with some moisture to make sure that it starts to activate. And the other thing you can do with this one is you can, and there's recipes online that you can add this one to a raw goat's milk. They suggest Green Juju because they've partnered with the Green Juju company, very clean goat milk company. Actually, now they're making a food too, so it's really nice. But you can ferment your own goat's milk and put that on your dog's food too. And there are different probiotic mixes. Some sort of Love Bugs is for either cat or dog. They have two that are dog specific with different species, a lot of different species of probiotics. So it's more than just the one species that's in a lot of, or two species that are in a lot of probiotic supplements. Again, Herbsmith has the benefit for this one is the shelf stability in that it's in capsules in a press pack. So you're not opening and closing the jar, allowing moisture to enter. You're actually popping out a capsule, opening the capsule and pouring it on the food. So it's got a nice shelf life. So there's a lot of different ways out there to do that. Some people want to add an extra vitamin, do some research. I like to use something that's got more natural ingredients to get those extra vitamins. This one happens to be one of them that I use. This is Dr. Harvey's. This happens to be Formative Years. I use this for my younger collie. I use Golden Years for the older collie. I like to, there's also, let's see, one from, oh, if anybody's familiar with Springtime supplements, they make horse, dog, and human supplements. They've got some wonderful naturally derived supplements that are good to use as well. We don't sell them. They don't get sold in stores. So, and Earth Animal also makes a really nice green supplement too, as opposed to the ones that are just packed with, say, the synthetic vitamins and minerals. Joint supplements. Quickly, there are all sorts of chews and things. I like to choose whatever supplement I give. I like to have one that has the aspects that will hit all of the areas of joint health. So it will help the cartilage, it will help the inflammation, it will maintain good bone. So I've got, for instance, this one has glucosamine, MSM. It even has boswellia, which is frankincense, which can help with pain. It's got beef collagen, chondroitin, and hyaluronic acid, and ascorbic acid, and a couple of other things in it. So it kind of hits all the joint supplements. So even though a food might say, you know, hey, hip and joint, and I'm adding this to my food, for my two particular dogs, and I stress that particular dogs. So, you know, work with your vet to understand your dog's health and what might be beneficial for them. My one girl is almost 13 and she looks like a crickety old lady when she gets up in the morning. And my 3-year-old has hip dysplasia. So it's all about prevention with her. And so they both get that one right now, which I've been very happy with the results for, especially for my older girl. I can see results with her more than the prevention that I'm doing with my younger girl. So those are all good things to think about adding to your bowl. And again, every dog's going to be different. So with that in mind too, what I also want to say is it's confusing out there. Make use of some of the dog food reviews, but look at the criteria that they use. And I will promote right now the Dogs Naturally magazine, the review that they've partnered with, which is Dog Food Review. I have it here somewhere. It'll be on that resource list, dogfoodreview.com, I think. That one seems to have really good criteria and looking very specifically at sources to kind of help you pick some of the best sourced companies, which is hard out there. Sometimes the big, huge conglomerates, they're sourcing from all sorts of places all over the time. Sometimes when you do go to the smaller companies, they really hone in on their sourcing and they have a little bit higher standard. One example that I want to say, and so far we're watching it, so far it's been good. Champion Pet Foods out of Canada has had a really good track record. And then they decided, well, we can't make all of our food in Canada because we just can't keep up with it. And they regionally sourced and their sourcing was very good. So they decided to build US kitchens. So down in Kentucky, they did all their homework. They regionally sourced foods down in ingredients down in Kentucky. And some people were up in arms. Oh, you've changed the formulas. Well, in order to get that good control on regional sourcing, that's what they did. So Canada supplied Canada and the EU, and Kentucky supplied the US and down into South America, or at least Central America. And their company was good. And now they've sold to Mars M&M, which has a lot of holdings in different food. So right now, instead of throwing them out the door, because some of the big companies have learned that if I buy this little company with a good name and I say, hey, let's cut all these corners, people are going to run screaming. So some of the companies have learned their lessons and have said, we're going to buy you. Please continue running as you are. So far, to our knowledge, that has been the case. If that changes, we'll say goodbye. But sometimes doing your homework, or at least asking a lot of questions, can kind of help you come to a good decision on what's in your bowl for your dog. Have I hit just about everything, Michelle?
I believe so, Kathleen, and it's actually 10:31.
Okay.
So what I'd like to do is turn to some questions that have been posed,
Sure.
which they're excellent.
Yeah.
Steve has asked, is grain-free safe?
Good question. Excellent question. There was the FDA warning. It was a warning. It wasn't a recall, that they had gotten a number of reports of dilated cardiomyopathy, and they thought that the big culprit might be grain-free foods, boutique foods. And they kind of lumped everything together. There was 78 pages of spreadsheet. I promise you, I read every report that was made. And they listed 16 companies. There were more than 16 companies listed in as what was being fed to these dogs with dilated cardiomyopathy. Some of them were breeds that where genetically you need to be aware that this is a potential, and some of them weren't. And there was a big scare, and all these grain-free foods were slammed, sales sank, and some of those companies decided to make an ancestral grain, grain inclusive, fantastic grain. Anyway, they decided to put grains in some new varieties. Since then, there have been studies, and there have been studies of studies. And at this time, they say, yeah, no, it's not necessarily the grain-free foods. Does that mean that we need to still be mindful of the carbohydrates that we're going in? Yeah, because our dogs really don't need as much carbohydrate as is stuffed in a kibble. However, again, rotation. So potatoes can be pro-inflammatory, as can some grains. We don't want to do corn, wheat, or soy. You want to be mindful of those products which have a lot of GMO background in them, which a lot of our corn, for example, is. So there are some other alternatives out there. Again, rotation. In some of the grain crops, they use Roundup is the brand name for glyphosate type things. Those crops at the end, oh, this corner of the crop field is not as dry as this one is, therefore we can't harvest yet. They'll spray it with this Roundup, which is an off-label use. Roundup is meant to kill plants, and it kills what's left, dries it out. Now it can all be harvested and go to big grain processing, the dryers. So now we have bits of glyphosate in there. So glyphosate, actually one country, I believe, I'm not going to say it right, but one country actually took Quaker oatmeal off of their shelves because of glyphosate levels. So we need to be mindful that that can be an issue too. Glyphosate can be used on some legumes as well. So there you've got the peas. So there needs to be more research. So is it grain versus not grain? Rotate and get as much fresh food without the carbohydrates in the end. But that's an excellent question. And most recent paper was that no, we don't need to be as worried about it just being grain-free. We need to do more research. And I think that's true.
And Kathleen, it seems to me that I recall since that whole scare started, a lot of the grain-free diets were low in taurine, taurine. And so my own watching things, I started to find that some of those companies, or a lot of them, were adding taurine to their foods. Is that correct? Or
good question. There is one company, Nature's Logic. And this might get to, I think you're also question about what regulation is done in the pet food industry. So this will answer both of those questions. There are two ways for a company to get the AAFCO statement put on their food. Notice I didn't say approved by or certified by AAFCO, which is the American Association of Feed Control Officials. They are not a regulatory agency. They are a bunch of people who come together in the industry mostly to say, this is our definition of this ingredient. And in order to maintain the basic health, not thriving health, but basic health, you need to make sure that you have this, this, and this in your food. There are two ways to get that statement to put on your bag, which reads, let's see, Nature's Logic Canine Turkey Meal Feast provides complete and balanced nutrition for all life stages and is comparable in nutritional adequacy to a product which has been substantiated using AAFCO feeding tests. That's a lot. So all that means is that that company did something to warrant that AAFCO statement on there. They can't put those letters AAFCO on there without it. All that means, again, is that it has basic nutrition. So the two ways are buy a bunch of vitamins and minerals and essentials and or non-essentials and put them in, or do feeding trials for a set number of days, months, years, whatever, and then prove that those dogs are still healthy. Nature's Logic decided to go the more expensive route and do that lengthier feeding trial. So you will not see taurine on that label. Taurine is naturally occurring in organ meat and muscle meat. So I had a customer come in and say, I have to return this food. My vet said it doesn't have taurine in it. Well, unfortunately, their vet, bless their hearts, I'm sure they're a wonderful vet, but they didn't know that muscle meat and organ meat have taurine, and there really is taurine in that food. So what we need to know more is the amounts of taurine. And then if you see taurine as an ingredient, it is probably a synthetic taurine that they purchased and put in. Many of the vitamins that we know are synthetically made. If we go and buy our 1-a-day vitamins, those are synthetically made vitamins. They didn't, squeeze an orange to get that vitamin C. Exactly. So some people have opted to do a taurine supplement. Again, what you can do if you're concerned about it is, talk to your vet or a nutritionist. What is the actual amount of taurine that my dog really needs? Okay, company, how much taurine can I expect in this cup of kibble that I'm pouring into the bowl? Ask them. And if you're concerned and you want to make sure, replace those biscuit treats with things like the chicken hearts or the beef liver, something that's an organ meat or the muscle meat. Again, that's another good way to treat with a purpose. It's like should we have when we go to the orchard, should we have the apple cider donut or should we enjoy an apple? We should probably enjoy an apple instead. And it's delicious. However, I would probably bring a donut home.
Thanks, Kathleen. Steve had another question that perplexes many of us. For those of us who have dogs, and I don't know if cats ever do this, but there are some dogs that tend to eat either their own poop or they'll skip over their own poop and go to their housemate's poop. In your experience, have you found any magic of how to change those behaviors?
I have
picking it up right away.
Really, I have had one dog that I inherited when my mom passed, one of the bloodhounds, who was so fast at getting to dog poop, not her own, she would eat others. But I've heard stories where dogs are turning around as they're pooping to eat their own. Excuse me. And no, I don't have a magic thing because otherwise maybe I could have gotten her to stop just physically being out there. Some dogs will do it more in the wintertime. I don't know why frozen is better, but some dogs will do it seasonally. That was kind of the joke in the greyhound community. It's poopsicle season. So are they missing something? Because that's been one thought. Is it just a nasty habit? It's probably down to the dog. If you give your dog, if you do those nice probiotics and enzymes and look at your gut biome, talk that over. Hopefully you have a holistic vet to at least consult if your own vet isn't holistic minded, because they can talk about gut health and improving that gut health so that the dogs aren't looking for something that might have some nutrition left could help.
Which brings me to an issue, Kathleen. Do you know, is there a place or a website to find veterinary, holistic veterinarians?
Yes, there is the American Holistic Veterinary Association, I believe. Okay. I'm saying that right, is one. And also I will, especially, I don't know how many people are from Wisconsin who are listening right now, but in my resources at the bottom, I have thanked the vets that I have learned a great deal from, who are Wisconsin vets, and then also have some others on there that, like Dr. Judy Morgan will do consults. Dr. Jody Gruenstern will do consults, so they can find a close vet or a relatively close vet on that American Holistic Veterinary Association website, or definitely use that sheet as a resource to see what you can do too.
Okay. And speaking of that sheet, Kathleen, I don't know, we're going to try to do share screen. Do you think
Okay.
that we can try that?
All right.
So we're going to see if Kathleen can share her screen. And if that doesn't work, don't fret. I will add that to the information that gets recorded and or put it on Facebook as well for you to access that information. So while Kathleen's seeing if we can work this out, Arnell has a question here. They say to avoid pulse ingredients, lentils, chickpeas, pea protein. Is this something to avoid? And if so, why?
I think there need to be more studies about it. At one point, the guess was back to the glyphosate issue, and just the residue of glyphosate being on the lentils, chickpeas, and peas, which is part of the harvesting operation a lot. I still use some treats and foods that have them. I guess that rotation, back to the rotation until we know more, is probably the best option. Because I know there are even homemade recipes. I don't know how the glyphosate level is because I don't think you would be able to use that in organic, but I don't know enough about that. If you sourced, I wouldn't think you could, but I haven't done that research to source that. But as far as the actual just chickpeas, lentils, there's still people of good reputable background that still have some of those in their recipes that they might give you. Again, some of those recipes are really good. Dr. Karen Becker wrote a book with recipes. Dr. Judy Morgan does recipes. Dr. Barbara Royal down in Chicago she won't post recipes, except I think she has treats and how to make chicken bone broth. But she will do it as part of your consult, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay. Connie asked, do you think the oils make a healthier coat?
Yeah, I do. There's so much good as far as what some of the oils can do. Off the top of my head, I can never keep anything straight about which oils have higher EPA, DHA, the different omega ratios. So then again, look at some of those oils, rotate around, but I definitely think I see a difference in the coats of my girls. And a lot of that thing is, it goes further than coat health. It goes to brain health and everything in your body that, that can benefit from the omegas.
One of the things that's always been a little confusing to me personally is when you look at a list of ingredients and there's maybe chicken or lamb, and then there's this stuff called lamb meal or chicken meal. What does that really mean?
Sure. Good question. So, for instance, the Nature's Logic that I held up here, they've got two lines. They have one that everything has just the meal in it. That is the chicken cooked down. So you're getting someone who's touting their food with the chicken meal as opposed to fresh chicken is going to say you're getting more condensed form of protein. You're getting more protein in your meat because it's cooked the water out. So we're starting that way. The downside to that meal is that you've cooked it already once. You're putting in the mix, and now you're extruding it at that high heat with everything else. And so how much nutrition is left from that double cooked chicken, essentially? The other thing is, okay, now they've got another line called distinction. So it'll start with fresh chicken, but it also has chicken meal in it. So now you're feeling really good because you got fresh chicken as that first ingredient. And that's good because now that's going to be put into the mix. It still has to be cooked down and extruded, but you've eliminated that first cooking process. But you're thinking, oh, I'm getting more fresh chicken than I am chicken meal. That chicken meal already has the moisture taken out of it. That fresh chicken has to be cooked down to take that moisture out too. So you've got one cooking process via two, but you've got a higher concentration of protein. Again, rotation is good. I kind of like the fresh chicken idea, but I want to make sure that food that maybe only has fresh chicken has enough really to give me that good meat percentage of protein.
And
does that help?
yes, it does. It does.
Okay.
If do we have to be concerned about the level of protein? Like, what's the upper limit of protein that a dog should get if they have normal kidney function, for
Oh,
instance?
wow. So anybody that feeds one of the frozen raw diets that doesn't have any added carbohydrates will say, well, that's pretty darn high protein.
Mhm.
And I don't have dogs with kidney issues. One of the things that is the benefit is that you've got the hydration. And so the water bowl doesn't actually accidentally go dry during the day when you're not home. The hydration is already in the food. So you're not asking the dog to eat all of this dry food and then have to drink enough water, and now the food expands. So you're asking the system to do a little bit more. And so is there a protein level? I haven't really heard of one. In a dry food, I would just want to make sure I rehydrated it. So if you have a higher protein food, your dog is still getting the appropriate hydration. I think that's probably as important, if not more important. A lot of times what the people will say, oh, you've got to go on a low protein diet because your dog has kidney issues. A lot of that is the phosphorus. And so you get the phosphorus and protein come together in muscle tissue. So if they lower the amount of meat in that, then yes, you're going to have lower phosphorus. So there are kind of ways around that. But in the end, if you can do that hydration along the way before your dog can potentially have those, I think that's probably one of the most helpful things, as opposed to being concerned about protein level.
Great.
Again, I'm not a vet, not a nutritionist, but
yeah,
that's the intuitive thing that I've picked up through all of this.
Okay. And what about the issue of probiotics, Kathleen? Are you a believer in them being used every day if the dog food doesn't have probiotics in it?
Yeah.
Or only when there are GI issues that flare up?
Right. So something like this, I personally have used not on an everyday basis, but I've used this stays in my cupboard because of the ability to store it. And so that's more of my go-to when there's an issue.
Okay.
For every day, it's going to be the goat milk, yogurt, kefir to give those naturally occurring probiotics. That seems to work well as my approach too. And if you're worried about dairy products in your dog, once you start fermenting, that uses up the lactose. So that lactose, you're not asking your dog to process, just milk from the cupboard. You're asking them to process something with less lactose, but also has those good probiotics. So it has not been an issue for my dog, although I know there are dogs that are a little more sensitive to the dairy products.
Okay, great. I think we have covered all the questions. Does anyone else have any questions that you haven't posed? If so, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and speak your question.
Hi, this is Connie. I just had a quick kind of question. My Scotty puppy male that's like 2 years old, like the one I'd asked about the oils for the coat. One of the fellows that helps me groom said I should switch the food because his coat is so soft and he eats the same as his mom, but I haven't switched anything. Do you think that would make a difference in his actual coat, or is it mostly just the grooming part?
Wow, that is a super good question. I know that most people with Scotties, for convenience sake, will have them clipped. And so sometimes in a Scotty coat, to the best of my knowledge, because it's a terrier type coat, responds better to the hand stripping, which is number one, very time consuming, and number two, it's expensive if you have somebody else do it for you.
Yeah, he's a show dog right now, so I have to hand strip him. He's still showing.
Oh, okay. All right. So then I will listen to your groomer, definitely, because if your groomer's hand stripping, that's fantastic. So in that case, boy, top coat versus undercoat, or just the softness of it?
It's his top. Yeah, it's his top coat, the wire, because I feed him the same thing as his mom, and his mom's has no issue you know,
Right.
and he keeps saying, switch the food, and I've been rolling it and brushing it, but so he's thinking it's more dietary, you know,
Okay.
than just working the coat.
Sure. What are you feeding, Connie?
Well, you know, I've got my Scottish Terrier puppy male, it was a singleton male, and he's very feisty. So I had to switch him to that Purina Calm Me Down food, the calming one, to
Okay.
try and keep him from being so hyperactive. So I
Mhm.
just feed him the straight kibble. Maybe every now and then I'll give him a little bit of steak or chicken, but mostly just the dry kibble, the calming one,
Okay.
Purina.
Sure. What I would do is try and my thoughts are to get in, yes, some fish oil or
Okay.
even some fish. So in the form of, you can even do, I know there's a couple of companies that do a dog-based canned sardine, but my sardines come from just the grocery store. I get them water packed. And so a couple of times a week, my dogs will get a sardine on their meal, and that can help.
Okay.
But I do the oils. And one of my colleagues, I kind of wish she had a bit of a different coat so I can understand. And we don't
Yeah.
go through the clipping or stripping, but nonetheless, but I think that does help. Would you, you know, what I would do is probably reduce that kibble, because also, and I'm not sure of what the ingredients are that are calming in that particular food. I'm just not familiar with it. But
Mhm.
I would also reduce the kibble because you're not putting as much sugar, essentially, with the carbohydrates into your dog, and replacing that with something a little fresher. And to see if that would also help, because then you're going to get more of the natural fat from the beef, chicken, whatever you would like to feed. And you're also getting not as much sugar. And so that could also help with the calming effect as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I will do
Sure.
that.
Okay,
Thanks again.
sure, you're welcome.
I have a quick question in
Yes.
regards to oils.
Yeah.
Your dog hates fish.
Oh,
I have a dog. I don't care what fish treat I give. She won't even eat food that has fish in it.
oh,
Is the coconut oil, is there something else we could give, like an omega supplement along with coconut oil, that she doesn't taste the fish? Would that
that's a super good question. I guess I would look at fish oils. It's been a while since I've used the
Mhm.
Brilliant, for example, so I don't remember
Okay.
if that smelled fishy. There's another company out there whose label I can see and whose name I cannot see, but they make both human and canine versions.
Okay.
They have a wide variety, and I want to say it comes out of Sweden.
I think Nordic Naturals makes it.
That's the one. That's the one.
Okay.
I would try that one.
Okay.
Definitely not the children's flavored ones, but
Yeah.
I would try some of theirs because I think that stands a chance of being less fishy.
Perfect.
If you want to do that. Yeah. Otherwise, with the coconut oil, I have loved to use coconut oil. There is some study out that says, no, we shouldn't be. Again, rotation, rotation, rotation.
I just had a
And
comment for Connie too, not to interrupt you. In Connie, in regards to your Purina calming kibble food,
Yes.
Purina
Uh-huh.
makes a supplement, it's in a package, just like they have their Fortiflora. They also have one it's a specialized probiotic that works with the gut, and it's called Calming Care. And it's a packet, and it can be added to any food daily. And it does help. It works with the gut working to the brain. So if you need to change
Yeah,
your food, you could use the
and
Purina.
I have that as well. I did purchase that at the
Okay.
same time, so I'm doing that too. Thank you so much. I appreciate the input.
Sorry to interrupt you, Kathleen.
no, that's okay. And that brings out a good point, because if we go down to the gut biome and gut health, keeping that, because the gut is the center of our immune system, and a healthy gut is going to be healthy physically and healthy mentally. So that is exactly a good point. And rotating those probiotics so that you get the dog appropriate species is a fantastic idea.
Thank you.
Sure.
And thanks for all your knowledge. It's been great with all of you presenting these.
Thank you.
Alrighty, Kathleen. Well, thank you so much for your time and tidbits of expertise this morning. I hope we can get you back perhaps this year at Rally. That's what we're going to work on.
Oh, all right.
I'll be talking to you about that in the near future. So again, for those of you that attended, thank you very much. We appreciate your participation today and your posting of questions, etc. I don't have a date set for our next ZOOMIE, but hopefully it will be sometime in January. If you have ideas of things that you'd like to hear about, please just send me a message at DC Scotty, spelled TTIE, rally @gmail.com. And if you've got ideas about speakers as well, or just topics, because my brain's pretty tired and I'm like at the bottom of the barrel trying to think of what people are wanting to hear about. So please help us out. Okay. Wish everyone a great holiday season. And most of all, make sure you let your kiddos, your Scotties and your kitties and your other breeds that you have at home know how grateful you are for them being in your lives. Thanks much, guys. See you next time.
Thank you. Thank you all. I kindly appreciate it. Yes, and have a wonderful holiday season. Thank you.
Thanks, Connie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.